From Minneapolis, Minnesota, welcome to Playwright Center's Theater Begins Here.
Today, theater begins in the middle school classroom, but first, a membership highlight. We're so excited to announce our Play Labs Festival is coming up starting April 14th through April 21st. This festival will showcase 3 plays by our current and affiliated writers. First, Esther Perel Ruined My Life by Mathilde Droptois, Pirate Steel by Peter Gil Sheridan, and Phantasma by Benjamin Benet. There will also be a showcase highlighting the work of our current Playwright Center Fellows. Check out our website for more information on these plays and when they'll be presented, both in person and online. And now, on to the show. Hi, we're so excited to invite our guest today, Don Zolidis. Originally from Wisconsin, Don Zolidis holds a BA in English from Carleton College and an MFA in playwriting from the Actors Studio program at the New School University. He has received the Princess Grace Award, multiple Edgerton Foundation New Play Awards, and many other honors. For the past decade, he has been the most produced playwright in American schools. His more than 140 published plays have been performed over 50,000 times, appearing in every state, every Canadian province, and 75 different countries. His first novel, The Seven Torments of Amy and Craig, A Love Story, was published in 2018 by Disney Hyperion. His second book, War and Speech, was published in 2020 by Little Brown. Welcome, Don.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
We love to jump into this first question. How did your theatrical journey begin?
I actually started out as an actor in high school. In high school, I kind of imagined that I was going to be a novelist. That's sort of what I wanted to do with my life at that point. But I got sucked into the theater world. And I noticed I had this huge crush on this girl who was in theater, and I noticed that there were not many boys involved in theater. So I thought, if I try out for the show and I'm amazing, she's going to love me. So I tried out for this really romantic play called The Crucible.
Yeah.
And like so many boys who could speak, I was given a major role. And then I just fell in love with acting after that point. And I acted in every show I could in high school. And then I didn't actually start playwriting until I was in college. I can tell a little story about how my very first play went. We had this thing at Carleton College, which is in Minnesota, where every Friday night, all the theater people would get together and we would perform scripts that had been written over the course of the week that no one had rehearsed or seen before. It's kind of like a 24-hour play thing, but it was sort of, you're given 3 ingredients on Monday. You were supposed to show up on Friday with scripts in hand. And I acted in a whole bunch of those. And then finally I decided I was going to write my very first play. So I wrote a play, and this is my freshman year in college, so almost 30 years to the day from today. And the first play I ever had performed, when it was over, somebody in the audience stood up and they turned around and they pointed at me and they said, "You're going to hell." And I was hooked after that. That's I was like, yes, I want to be a playwright now. So that's kind of how I got started. And then I ended up writing a whole bunch more of those plays in college and acted in everything I could.
That's amazing. Your first bad review and you were hooked.
I think it was a little ironic. I think she was being facetious when she was saying that to me. That person ended up actually directing one of my shows in Chicago one year. So
that's awesome. At what point did you know you were going to stick with playwriting and maybe make it into a career for yourself?
I think I was doing a lot of those. I was writing a lot of those plays during college, and I still thought I was going to be a novelist, which is sort of what I was hoping to do with my life. I'm just a person with unrealistic dreams, really. But I just got so much energy from writing the plays. And what was really wonderful, and I didn't realize this until later, and what a blessing this was, is that I got so much audience feedback. And I got so many opportunities to see my work actually performed live in front of people, which is very difficult for playwrights. And I didn't really realize what a treasure I had in that when I was in college. But I guess it just seemed like something really fun that I loved doing every week. And then when I was a senior in college, I decided to write my very first like full-length play and produce it myself, which I didn't understand playwriting format at the time. And I wrote the script. We were rehearsing the script, and it was the Sunday before the show was supposed to go up. And it was the first time that we actually managed to get through the entire play. And it was 3.5 hours long. I was like, oh no. We survived that play, and that's kind of when I decided I wanted to be a playwright for my career.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's always what it is. Your very first full length, especially if you produce it, it's 1,000,000 years long.
Yeah, right.
You don't believe in cuts.
You're like, no, it's all beautiful. It's amazing.
Right. Especially like when you self-produce, and did you direct it as well?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, you're just like every moment I see it. It's so great. And then you run it all together and you're like, it's brilliant. People will sit here.
They'll, they sat for The Godfather. They'll sit for my play.
That's right. Totally earned somehow.
Exactly.
It's only 30 minutes longer than The Godfather.
So in the theater world, we often hear that Lauren Gunderson is the most produced playwright in the field.
Mm-hmm.
But technically you are. Not even technically. Throughout the technically, you are. And while you certainly have a crossover audience with Lauren, it feels like the main difference between your plays' productions are that you're primarily produced in schools. So
Yes.
How did you start writing for young audiences, but particularly in the educational world?
Okay, so this is sort of my journey because I never set out to do this. I never thought I would write for young people. I was writing the plays that you write when you're, 24 years old, which are, full of, I thought I was going to be the next Sam Shepard or something like that, right? So terrible, horrible things are happening on stage, and that's what you're into. And I still write some of those plays from time to time, but essentially what happened is after I got my master's degree in playwriting, my secondary dream was always to be a teacher. So I always sort of set out to have that as my day job while I was being a playwright at night or over the summer. So first I got a job at a boarding school in New Hampshire, and I didn't write anything for my kids there. But then I got a job teaching middle school theater in DFW, kind of in a pretty low income, diverse school that was, having some troubles. And I discovered that I hated everything that was aimed at middle school kids. I just thought it was insulting their intelligence. I thought it was too cutesy or dumb, or it just didn't speak to them at all. And I tried really, really hard to find plays for them. And finally, this is an illegal story, by the way. So we were going to do The Good Doctor by Neil Simon. And I thought it was funny. I thought the humor was clean. It's Neil Simon, it's a great show. It's Neil Simon making fun of Chekhov, which, I'm sure middle school kids in Texas just loved, like an old Jewish man making fun of a dead Russian guy. Like that was their jam. So they hated it. I have since seen The Good Doctor performed by many, many other high school kids. So maybe it was only my specific group, but my kids did not want to do this show. And they didn't want to do this show because the language was old fashioned and they didn't like it. And finally they were going to boycott the play. And I said, well, what do you guys want me to do? You want me to just take this home and rewrite it in modern language and bring it back in? And they were like, yes. So I did that. Sorry, Neil. So I totally violated Neil Simon's copyright. I rewrote the whole play myself. I brought it back in, and my kids loved it. And we performed it illegally. And essentially, nobody fired me afterwards. That was always my fear. My fear was that if I ever wrote for my students, they would just fire me because I was writing lots of inappropriate things for middle school. But in this play, I kept it clean, and the play was a hit, and everybody enjoyed it. And then I thought, well, you know what? Maybe I can start writing for my kids. So I started writing plays for my students. And pretty soon I realized that I actually had stumbled into the playwright's dream, which was here I had a 600-seat theater to myself, that we were just going to do my shows. And I had a repertory company of actors waiting to do them and an audience that was going to come in. And I was like, this is what every playwright has always wanted, right? Like, just so happens that my repertory company of actors are 12 and 13-year-olds. So I started essentially writing all of these really ridiculous, silly plays. And sometimes they were serious, sometimes they were dramas. But I would write plays for my students. We would perform them. And then afterwards, the kids would be like, well, what are we doing next? And I'd be like, we're doing another play. And they'd be like, what's it about? And I would say, I don't know. I'll bring it in on Monday. And that experience that I had in college of getting ingredients on Monday and showing up on Friday with a script really came in handy because I knew how to write really fast. So I wrote quickly, and we would just go from play to play to play. And then after that first year, I connected with Play Scripts, which was just beginning at that time. John and Doug Rand had founded it in a dorm room in Pennsylvania. And they were maybe like 3 or 4 years old at that point and were just hungry for material. So they published everything that I wrote. And then other schools started doing them. So that's sort of how it began. And it just kind of stumbled into it because I really didn't like the stuff for middle school.
That's so incredible. You're actually a little bit famous at Playwright Center already. We mentioned that we were going to have you on the podcast, and one of our younger staff members was like, oh, I know Don Zolidis. And they got really like excited and said they'd done some of your shows in high school.
It's pretty amazing that, a lot of people, 30 and under, I was their first theatrical experience somewhere. Yeah. It's really humbling and wonderful to think that, I've had all these people who are out there in the theater world have, cut their teeth on my silly middle school plays at some point, or in high school or somewhere along the line.
So cool.
Did you ever specifically write to your students? Because they always change over and move on to high school. But did you ever write to any particular?
Yeah, I think, you have these, it's kind of like the Shakespeare model, right? Like you have your great tragedian, you have your great like clown, and you try to write to their talents. And you would never tell them that, right? You don't know, like, oh, no, I don't think about anybody when I'm writing this part. And then I specifically, put stuff in there, and you definitely have like muses, like you have certain characteristics that you see in people that you want to like bring out in the shows. So yeah, all that stuff comes in.
Are you also thinking about, are you grappling with specific themes or societal issues that you see your students dealing with at the moment? How do you sort of mine your experience of being with young people and writing about those themes?
I think that there's a lot there. I think if I think about my themes, that's sort of my ethos of playwriting for young people, it comes back to what bothered me in the beginning, which was that the plays were insulting their intelligence. And so I was trying to write, I feel like this is sort of pretentious to say, but smart plays for the kids, right? But also smart plays that used what I learned in graduate school, which was to get at the truth. So if I am writing more of a drama at a point, I am trying to get to a complex truth rather than, the cliche that I saw all the time in scripts for them. And sometimes as well, I would incorporate, things that my kids were dealing with. I wrote a play where it was basically an adaptation of a chorus line for middle school, which was a bunch of people were auditioning for a show, and you sort of followed their storylines, and some of them were funny and some of them were serious. And there was a monologue that a kid gave about how his mom never came to see him. And it was a pretty heartbreaking monologue about how, fell in love with theater and had been in this show, and mom never always looked for his mother in the audience and she was never there. And of course, he performed it in the competition and his mom was not there in the audience. So it's sort of like there's these things that you would use from life and that would be sort of a little heartbreaking sometimes, but also trying to speak to what I saw in those kids, which is that they're very, very smart. The cutesy, simple stuff doesn't work for them.
Mm-hmm. Are you always writing for young people or thinking about young people and having them in mind, or do you have other audiences? Do you focus on primarily middle school? Do you write for adults? Have you written for kindergarten level?
I would say my plays are just as popular in high school as they are in middle school, so it's definitely that age as well. And there are definitely plays that I write that are aimed at older audiences. For many years, I would try to write at least like one, what I would call a professional play every year and try to send that out to theaters. And I had some success there. I had a few productions here and there and a few on the National New Play Network circuit a few times. But it's so seductive to write a play and know that it's going to go into rehearsal and be performed 2 months down the line after you started writing it versus, one play took 10 years from when I won an award to when it was actually staged. And that's not all that uncommon in the professional world for it to take years to see a show on its feet. So when you get that sort of immediate gratification of getting a show up, it does pull you in that direction. So I write plays that definitely get done in community theaters a lot. I'm writing a farce right now for a high school that's taking it to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. But that's going to end up being a show that's going to be more done in community theaters and colleges than it will be done in high schools, just because of the nature of it. So I definitely try to write each play to maybe a different audience. There are some that I think, okay, this is a middle school show, or some I think this is a high school show, or some I hope that this is a community theater play that they're going to love. And rarely I will try to tackle the play where I'm like, this could be a professional show. And then I will be sad because it won't be produced.
Oh. Are you still teaching, Don?
No, I ended up teaching school. I taught middle school and high school for a total of 8 years. Then I actually got a job teaching playwriting at a college for 3 years. And then at that point, I was able to quit and just be a full-time playwright. So I haven't been in the classroom for a while, although I do a lot of workshops with students. I do a lot of visits with schools. And occasionally I will be in rehearsal with a school that might be near me that's doing one of my shows.
Can you talk about that process and how it's changed? It sounds like when you were teaching, you were really workshopping these plays and writing them super quickly for your students. What is your process like now? How is it similar and how has it changed?
Yeah, it's definitely changed over the years. And that's one of the things I'm kind of sad about. Because in the beginning, I would direct everything. I was also the technical director. And I would also run the light and sound booth while we were doing, so I did everything.
Yep.
And the producer. But it allowed me to, and there's really no replacement for this as a playwright, to just be there in rehearsal every day and to see what's working and to know, and to change a line and to change the script and to be fixing the play as you're producing it. So I don't get that chance anymore. I'm no longer able to sort of direct the shows myself or be in rehearsal with them. So in a sense, I usually send out the plays to get sort of workshop productions in the beginning and then get feedback, but maybe not even see a performance before I rewrite that play to send off to a publisher. I think I benefit from, having written so many plays at this point that I have a really good feel for, I think, what works and what doesn't work. So I don't know that and this might just be wrong, I don't know that I need to be in rehearsal as much as I used to.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I can sense it as I'm writing it. And that, again, I might be wrong. but I'm not in rehearsal as much as I used to be. That's the thing I miss the most about where my life is and where it was, as I don't get to be there every day in the theater, in rehearsal, getting my hands dirty in the show.
Yeah. How are you finding students when you are workshopping it, or maybe they're older and they're not kids?
I usually, so at this point, there are directors who have done many, many of my shows, and they are always willing to be guinea pigs on the new plays. So they're excited to try something new that's going to be a brand new show. Sometimes, well, for instance, what I did last year is I had 3 high schools that were all doing the same. They're all rehearsing the same play. I had 2 of them in Austin, Texas, and 1 of them in Rochester, New York, because I split my time back and forth. So I would go from school to school, and I would sit in rehearsals of different groups of people doing the same play, which was wonderful because I would see, the same scenes are being done by 3 different groups of people, and you see some things that they're all finding the same and some things that they're finding different things in it. Mm-hmm. And I told them, like, I'm going to be rewriting this script while you're performing it or while you're rehearsing it. And so I would make cuts or changes from one school, and then I would send them to the other 2. And I did that process because it was a complicated, difficult play that I wanted to get the voice right. I wanted it to sound right. So I, basically just used a whole bunch of people in different areas. And then at the same time, I had, I think, maybe 10 other schools around the country that were doing the same show.
Wow.
That I would Zoom in with and just have like a 1-hour feedback session with them. So, I had a show in Miami, I had a show in Wyoming, I had a show, Texas, and like all different places to see how it was speaking to other groups of kids. Now, I can't do that with every play because that's all I would do. But for a big, involved, complicated play, that's what I did.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
High school and middle school is so different now. Just even theme, like if you choose bullying, it looks very different from the 80s to the 90s to early 2000s to now. And
right.
How are you keeping up with the youth of today?
Oh, I mean, well, luckily I have a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old now. So once they age out, I don't know what I'm going to do. Then I might need to really spend more time actually working with young people in schools than I have for the last couple of years. So I'm blessed with having 2 teenagers, so they help me. And sometimes I'll run questions by them like, hey, do you know what this is? And they're like, of course we know what that is. I'm like, okay. Are you going to get this reference? And they're like, yeah. And it's really fun to actually just sit down with my 2 kids and read a script together and to make them laugh. And they both do theater in high school, which is tough on them.
Do they ever do your shows at their
Well, their current high school, their teacher was a big fan of mine before they ever got there. So she did one of my shows every year. And then my kids got there and then she stopped because she thought it'd be too weird. There was a point where my youngest son auditioned for a show here in Austin. Like they have a kids acting program, sort of a outside of school youth theater program. And they were doing my play. And he went and auditioned and they didn't know that that his father had written the play. So he auditioned and then he got cast in it. And then he was like, oh yeah, my dad wrote this. So he was in 2 of my plays that way. And that was really fun.
That's cool. Yeah. He was intimately aware of the script ahead of time. Spent some time with this. That's cool. What are some things or wisdom you've learned about writing for young people that you would share with other writers who want to try writing for a younger audience?
A couple of things. I think that I benefited a lot, and I lucked into a lot of this. I benefited a lot from being a classroom teacher. What that meant is that I would write plays that would work in the classroom, and they would work for other teachers, and they would speak to the specific challenges that a theater teacher might have that an outside playwright might not understand. So for instance, if I have a play with 25 characters in it, which is pretty normal for what I do, and I'm rehearsing that play during school, if I have a scene that just 2 people are in for a long time, well, as a teacher, I now have 23 people sitting behind me that are bored. And they're going to be annoying and they're going to be a pain in the butt. And so, a normal playwright would not think about that. Like, oh, they're just going to be off in the wings being, quiet. And I'm like, no, they're not going to be quiet. They're going to be rowdy 13-year-olds. So I would have to write plays where I would figure out some ways was like, okay, how do I break up this play so that I can have multiple scenes rehearsing at the same time, so that I can have everybody in the classroom doing something simultaneously, so that it's easier for the director and the teacher to actually keep the class going. So things like that were crucial. I would have things where, as a teacher, you don't have control over your cast. So 26 kids show up. I have to have 26 parts. And then guess what? Somebody moved in the middle of your semester, and now you have to deal with that. Or somebody moved in, and now you have a new kid here today, and they're like, I'm from St. Louis. Like, okay, you're going to be this part. So, I would write plays that were very flexible that way, that could accommodate a person leaving or a person joining. And that's another thing that I don't think, they don't teach you in graduate school to think about that.
Whoa.
I also think that, and this comes back to my philosophy, is I don't dumb it down at all. I use 100% of my talent and skill and ideas to write for young people. I use just as much of my skill and talent for a play for middle school as I do for a play for adults. And because they know when it's like, when it's not true or not real. So I think give the kids credit. Don't dumb it down and just speak truth. And I think that they'll respond to that.
I don't know why, but I immediately started thinking about the Wiggles.
That is much younger than what I do.
It's true, but
Alayna,
that's how they came about. Like, I watched the documentary recently.
Oh, really? Okay.
And it's actually really fascinating is that there was, I think, one or two of them that were in early childhood education. And then they were actually musicians playing for adult audiences.
Yeah.
And then they would just do silly songs. But they were like, no, there's a lot of technique, and me thinking about like, okay, children need to learn how to their fine motor skills and like to work on those. That's all this song does. But also is like, I'm singing this song because I need the kids to move, but stay in one place and not touch each other.
Yeah, right.
And it came from being in the classroom and actively working with them in ways that you don't necessarily learn while you're in school.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that the other thing that I'll bring in, and this is another part of my philosophy, and I discovered this, I think I came to this realization years later, but I had been, which is that the people that I am writing for, and I think about this as a playwright, like what is the most important thing? Is it, the audience, or is it the play itself? And for me, the most important thing in my writing are the performers. I am writing for the actors. The play is not the most important thing. The audience, they're going to come see it for an hour, but I had those kids every day for months. So they're the ones whose experience matters the most to me. All that is to say that if I'm writing a play with 25 parts, I want it to have 25 fun parts and not, 3 spear carriers in the back, because that's not a very good educational experience for those kids that are doing that. And they're not going to be excited about coming to rehearsal every day. So if I'm writing a play that has a smaller role, I make sure that that smaller role has a moment to shine and has, you know, a bigger personality or something that's memorable that that actor gets to do. That's my most important constituency, is the performer on the stage. And I think that's different than a professional playwright as well, who might have the audience experience be the most important thing for them, or the integrity of the play in some cases. But for me, it's the performer.
I really love that distinction. I've never heard that before. But what a profound opportunity for those students then. Like, what a gift to do a Don Zolidis play.
Well, yeah, I hope so.
What has surprised or delighted you most about your work?
I think, and this I started pretty early on, was I realized that when I started writing for my middle school students, that the stakes were very low for me, which meant that I could do anything and that I could take all these theatrical chances, and, you know, it could work or it could not work, but I could just let my imagination run wild. And no one was going to tell me, like, you can't do that. Like, I wrote a part for a tapeworm in a school play, like, named Squirmy, that comes out and sings songs. I would write the most ridiculous things I could because I felt like very free, and that we were just having fun, and it wasn't like, oh, this play has to be so important so that it can get off Broadway and, you know, we can do it, you know, the reviews in New York have to come in. Like, no, we're doing a silly middle school show. I can write whatever I want. And that was amazingly freeing for me. And it really unleashed my creativity. I think it still does. It still does, the ability to just write silly, silly things and, you know, take theatrical chances.
So a big thing that comes up a lot especially in our world, is how do you get the production? If you have a bunch of productions, that means you're successful. And what does success look like? And you being the most produced playwright, what does success look like for you? And is this kind of a goal that you set out to achieve, is to be the most produced?
I don't think that was the goal. I think that would be a pretty terrible goal. I think, like, I will destroy everyone. No,
It doesn't feel like that. But
um, I think the goal that I wanted to be a playwright. That was what I wanted to. And kids ask me this all the time. It's like, oh, well, since you've written all these plays, are you, like, when are you done? And I'm like, well, the goal was to be a playwright. So if a playwright writes plays, so that's what I'm going to do with my life, because this was the dream, right? So for me, success means that I get to write more plays. I love writing plays, which is, you know, a strange thing, I guess, for a writer to say. But sometimes, you know, we hear from writers and they're like, oh, it's like pulling teeth, and like, oh, I have to struggle. I'm going back to the word mines to work. And, you know, it's hard. It is difficult, but I do love doing it. So I'm so lucky that I get to spend my day, you know, playing make-believe and writing plays and, you know, daydreaming, basically. So I think that's what success looks like for me, is the ability to continue to work and ability to continue to write. I think the other measure of success is to write something and know that it's going to see the stage and that it's going to be performed. Because, like many playwrights, I toiled for many years on plays that never got performed, and it lives on your computer, and it's, you know, only a half-formed thing when it's not put on its feet. Or you get a staged reading, and then you get another staged reading, and then you get another staged reading, and then you don't get the production. So for me, the knowledge that what I am working on will get on stage and will be put in front of people is a huge, huge thing.
It sounds like you've had a really beautiful journey. I mean, kind of the dream in many ways, as you were naming these big audiences, huge casts, imagine what you will. Like what a beautiful journey.
Thank you.
I yeah, really, really admire it. And meaningful too, you know, it seems.
It's yeah, it's really humbling and cool to think about the fact that there's, you know, I think at this point several 100,000 people that have acted in my plays. So like
cool.
like I could run into them like they're out on the street. So
they're
yes,
at
right.
the Playwright Center
in your building.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And when people say don't write big cast scripts and you're like, no, and give everybody a really cool role too.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
incredible.
This is an interesting thing too, because when you're in graduate school, right, they're teaching you to write these like 4-character plays or 5-character plays. And once you start writing, you know, plays that have 20 or 30 characters in it, your themes can kind of change, because you can do more things on stage than you can do with 5. And you can have, you know, if you have a 5-character play, it's probably an interpersonal conflict or an internal conflict. But when you have 30, you can have a person versus society as a conflict. You can have a crowd. You can show what happens when, you know, people are manipulated, a large group of people are manipulated. Things like that you can do in a musical, maybe, but you can't really do in a straight play on the American stage very well, unless you're doing Shakespeare, right? So it broadens your scope a bit of things that are possible once you realize that you have 30 bodies that you can throw out there. And that also opens the scope of theatricality of what you can do, because I didn't have a lot of money when I was doing these plays. In fact, I had a budget of 0 because I was scared of the school secretary, and never asked for any money. Which is another reason I wrote the plays, because I couldn't pay for royalty. But what I did have was a lot of bodies and a lot of people. And I could create things with, you know, theatricality, with having 20 kids on stage do something simultaneously that feels very different than when you do with 4 characters. You know, writing for a large cast changes the way that you write plays sometimes.
Yeah. Do you have any art crushes that you'd like to share with us? People who inspire you?
I mean, I love the people that I sort of came of age with. That would be like the Qui Wens of the world, and the Lauren Gunderson, Sarah Rule, my good friend Graham Gillis, who's now at Ensemble Studio Theater, who went to graduate school with me. So sort of being there in the beginning in New York with a lot of those people who've gone on to do very different things with their careers, but I've loved watching their careers over the years and to see what they're doing and being and to follow, you know, and be like, oh, I wish I could do that. I'm like, oh, well, you know, I'm sure they wish they could do what you're doing. So, you know, it's lovely to watch other people succeed.
Well, where can people find your plays?
So I am mostly published with play scripts, but I also have work with Samuel French, Dramatic Publishing, a new publisher called Stage Partners. There's a publisher called Youth Plays that has some of my plays. And you can go to my website, www.donzolidis.com, and I've got a whole big list of all of them there, so you can find the links to where all the shows are.
Well, we did have a submitted question.
Okay.
From the world, the outside world, and a listener. How does it feel to be such a popular playwright in the speech and debate world? And as a follow-up question, does the function of humorous and duo performances ever influence your writing?
So if you're not familiar, speech and debate is kind of a subculture of, it's sort of a close to theater, but not quite the same. And people will perform essentially 10-minute segments of plays and, you know, play all of the characters themselves. Or if there are two people will play all of the characters in a play. And I knew nothing about this. But my first year writing plays, or my first year writing for middle school, I wrote a play with the most ridiculous title I could think of. I wrote a play called Bobby Wilson Can Eat His Own Face, which I started out with the title and I said, what if this is what I'm talking about being like totally free. I'm like, I'm just going to come up with the stupidest title I can, and then I'm going to write a play around that. So that was the title of the play. And then it was published. And the first year it was published, I would get these sort of Google alerts for my name, and I would realize that they were talking about me in the like these speech and debate like chat room boards. And so they were going to nationals this year. So the people had qualified for nationals. And one kid posted, and he's like, I'm doing this play that no one's ever heard of before called Bobby Wilson Can Eat His Own Face. And then I watched as 6 other people said, that's the play I'm doing. Like, I'm doing that play. So 6 people at nationals, the first year it was published, qualified doing that script, which immediately prompted another topic, which was, is Don Zolidis the new Christopher Durang? And someone was like, slow your roll. He's written 3 plays. Relax.
Yes. Claim it.
And so from that first year, they were hugely popular, just I think on the basis of weird names. And so I never wrote specifically for that world because I really write 10-minute plays that much. I have done a few that have been aimed at speech and debate a bit, but also I don't get paid when someone performs it for speech and debate. So it's like that's great that I'm really popular. I see no money from that. That's wonderful. Also in speech and debate is where I get haters, which is, I want to say, an amazing thing for a playwright to get. Where I sometimes will see people will tweet out, like, I hate Don Zolidis. And that's it. That's the whole tweet. And then they'll get a bunch of like likes and retweets on that. And I'm like, that is an amazing privilege to be like so ubiquitous that people can just hate you. Like, I don't think anybody's out here, hating Lynn Nottage, right? Like, I don't know. But yeah, so that's been the sort of, it's a strange journey. So then I wrote a novel about the speech world. I wrote a novel called War and Speech, which is about a girl who joins the #1 speech and debate team in the country in order to destroy it from the inside out. And I used a lot of my experience in speech and debate, and I actually volunteered at a high school here in Austin as a assistant speech and debate coach. So I like embedded with them for a year, which was great because I was hugely famous in the speech and debate world, and they'd be like, yeah, he's our assistant coach. And then I sometimes I moonlighted then as a judge in the speech and debate world just to get that experience. And I got to watch people perform, which was really fun.
Yeah.
So
that is so cool. And that book is published now?
Yeah, so that's out from Little Brown. That came out in May 2020. So it was somehow overlooked because the world was on fire.
Oh my gosh. Well, maybe now. Now is the time.
Yeah, maybe now. This podcast will launch it.
It will, yes. Well, this is Alayna's favorite part of the podcast, where we ask you where theater begins for you.
I think theater begins in the impulse to daydream. I think that's what as far back as I can remember, I would just lose myself in daydreams as a small kid. And I would always daydream with like narratives, like long narratives. And so I think that's where this sort of impulse came from for me, was just sort of trying to bring those daydreams to life. And that's, I think, what I try to do as a playwright.
That's beautiful. I think I'm on the same wavelength as Don today of theater begins with unrealistic dreams where you get to be silly, daydream, and play make-believe.
Nice. Yes. Yes. Yeah, I particularly enjoyed that unrealistic dreaming. thing that you said earlier, Don. That was great. I really appreciated what you said about sort of the distinction between who you write for. And so I'll say today that I apologize if you can hear my cat meowing. Theater begins when the cat meows. No, theater begins when you write a play for the actors who are going to perform.
I have to point out that you missed you missed a good pun there, Hannah. You could have been like, theater begins when you're the cat meow. So
you got it for me. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a really, really lovely conversation.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Now I'm excited to read some of your work. I want to read this book. I actually really do. I did speech and debate when I was in high school, and it was...
Join us for our next episode on April 24th. Let us know on Spotify where theater begins for you. And feel free to send your questions for future episodes to the link in the bio.
Thanks for listening to Playwright Center's Theater Begins Here.
I am mostly published with play scripts, but I also have work with Samuel French, Dramatic Publishing, a new publisher called Stage Partners. There's a publisher called Youth Plays that has some of my plays. And you can go to my website, www.donzolidis.com, and I've got a whole big list of all of them there, so you can find the links to where all the shows are.
Well, we did have a submitted question.
Okay.
From the world, the outside world, and a listener. How does it feel to be such a popular playwright in the speech and debate world? And as a follow-up question, does the function of humorous and duo performances ever influence your writing?
So if you're not familiar, speech and debate is kind of a subculture of, it's sort of a close to theater, but not quite the same. And people will perform essentially 10-minute segments of plays and, play all of the characters themselves. Or if there are two people will play all of the characters in a play. And I knew nothing about this. But my first year writing plays, or my first year writing for middle school, I wrote a play with the most ridiculous title I could think of. I wrote a play called Bobby Wilson Can Eat His Own Face, which I started out with the title and I said, what if, this is what I'm talking about being like totally free. I'm like, I'm just going to come up with the stupidest title I can, and then I'm going to write a play around that. So that was the title of the play. And then it was published. And the first year it was published, I would get these sort of Google alerts for my name, and I would realize that they were talking about me in the like these speech and debate like chat room boards. And so they were going to nationals this year. So the people had qualified for nationals, and one kid posted and he's like, I'm doing this play that no one's ever heard of before called Bobby Wilson Can Eat His Own Face. And then I watched as 6 other people said, that's the play I'm doing. Like, I'm doing that play. So 6 people at nationals, the first year it was published, qualified doing that script, which immediately prompted another topic, which was, is Don Zolidis the new Christopher Durang? And someone was like, slow your roll. He's written 3 plays. Relax.
Yes. Claim it.
And so from that first year, they were hugely popular, just I think on the basis of weird names. And so I never wrote specifically for that world because I really write 10-minute plays that much. I have done a few that have been aimed at speech and debate a bit, but also I don't get paid when someone performs it for speech and debate. So it's like that's great that I'm really popular. I see no money from that. That's wonderful. Also in speech and debate is where I get haters, which is, I want to say an amazing thing for a playwright to get, where I sometimes will see people will tweet out, like, I hate Don Zolidis. And that's it. That's the whole tweet. And then they'll get a bunch of like likes and retweets on that. And I'm like, that is an amazing privilege to be like so ubiquitous that people can just hate you. Like, I don't think anybody's out here, hating Lynn Nottage, right? Like, I don't know, I don't know. But yeah, so that's been the sort of, it's a strange journey. So then I wrote a novel about the speech world. I wrote a novel called War and Speech, which is about a girl who joins the #1 speech and debate team in the country in order to destroy it from the inside out. And I used a lot of my experience in speech and debate, and I actually volunteered at a high school here in Austin as a assistant speech and debate coach. So I like embedded with them for a year, which was great because I was hugely famous in the speech and debate world, and they'd be like, yeah, he's our assistant coach. And then I sometimes I moonlighted then as a judge in the speech and debate world just to get that experience. And I got to watch people perform, which was really fun.
Yeah.
So
that is so cool. And that book is published now?
Yeah, so that's out from Little Brown. That came out in May 2020. So it was somehow overlooked because the world was on fire.
Oh my gosh. Well, maybe now. Now is the time.
Yeah, maybe now. This podcast will launch it.
It will, yes. Well, this is Alayna's favorite part of the podcast, where we ask you where theater begins for you.
I think theater begins in the impulse to daydream. I think that's what as far back as I can remember, I would just lose myself in daydreams as a small kid. And I would always daydream with like narratives, like long narratives. And so I think that's where this sort of impulse came from for me, was just sort of trying to bring those daydreams to life. And that's, I think, what I try to do as a playwright.
That's beautiful. I think I'm on the same wavelength as Don today of theater begins with unrealistic dreams where you get to be silly, daydream, and play make-believe.
Nice. Yes. Yes. Yeah, I particularly enjoyed that unrealistic dreaming thing that you said earlier, Don. That was great. I really appreciated what you said about sort of the distinction between who you write for. And so I'll say today that I apologize if you can hear my cat meowing. Theater begins when the cat meows. No, theater begins when you write a play for the actors who are going to perform.
I have to point out that you missed you missed a good pun there, Hannah. You could have been like, theater begins when you're the cat meow. So
you got it for me. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a really, really lovely conversation.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Now I'm excited to read some of your work. I want to read this book. I actually really do. I did speech and debate when I was in high school, and it was...
Join us for our next episode on April 24th. Let us know on Spotify where theater begins for you. And feel free to send your questions for future episodes to the link in the bio.
Thanks for listening to Playwright Center's Theater Begins Here.